Hey everyone, hope you are all doing well. Happy Wednesday, although it feels very weird saying that with a topic like we have for today. Welcome to Myles Dyer Live, a weekly show every Wednesday where we talk about things from the serious to the laid back. Sometimes we'll take it laid back with talks of pop culture, movies, games, books. I haven't done books for a while. Quizzes, all sorts. And then other times we take it to the more serious issues. Maybe it's mental health and well-being, world events. Last week was a bit of a mixed one, really, because we did discussions around pizza toppings and what was the best pizza topping. Was that really last week? And so the irony of it was I was going to kind of joke today saying that, I think this week it could be just as contentious as talking about pizza toppings. Anyone that's seen the title of this knows that we're in for a bit of a deep one. And so I do want to lay in some ground rules from the get-go, just because I'm sure there will be people that are joining that perhaps haven't seen the show before. There's a lot of very passionate people online about their feelings and thoughts towards the current conflict in Israel and Palestine. And look, I'm just going to be very straightforward with you about it. I've been kind of keeping eye on the news. I've been engaging in it from time to time in terms of what I post out there. I do try and keep it balanced where I don't want to just be bombarding people with it, because it is a very overwhelming topic. There's a lot of difficult things to see out there. And today in the UK was quite an important day because there was a motion in the House of Commons where our members of Parliament, our representatives, were going to vote on whether to call for a ceasefire in Israel and Palestine. The results have come through. The motion didn't go through. And I was someone that was for a ceasefire, and obviously I'm going to make my case for that later. But I want to lay the groundwork in this conversation to say, look, people are going to have very different opinions on what they make of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And it's a very difficult thing to talk about because people come at this from very different perspectives. And I don't mean in terms of their perspectives on the issue and what should be done and what they think of it, but in terms of where people are in life. There are people maybe watching this show that have family members that were, involved in the conflict in somehow, or know someone who was involved in the conflict somehow. There are people that maybe are incredibly active within organisations that are campaigning one way or another for certain resolutions to come forth. But then there are other people that are just getting on with their everyday lives and seeing all of this and are feeling incredibly overwhelmed. Gut-wrenching footage of everything going on and not really sure what to think about it. Or maybe they do have thoughts about it, but then it can be a bit worrying because then if you start having opinions on it, you then get challenged, because this is what the internet's about. The internet is about getting challenged, and more so on certain platforms like X, Twitter, getting piled on. And so people don't really want to talk about it. Like, they have thoughts, they don't want to talk about it. And so today, I want it to be a safe space, and that's a term I don't use a lot. I think it's a fine term to use. It's just something I don't like to use often. But I do want it to be a safe space to have a really honest conversation. But I especially want it to be an open conversation for those of you out there that perhaps feel very uncomfortable with this issue. Maybe you don't know a lot about what's going on and maybe have questions. And I just want us to sort of go through it. So I have a list of notes with me. And earlier today, I was just thinking, I think this is definitely going to have to be what the topic's about. It's been on my mind for many, many weeks, obviously since October, when it was all flaring up in the news again after the horrific massacre that took place in Israel, in which over 1,200 people lost their lives and others were taken hostage, many of whom still are hostage, others brutally murdered. And then we've seen the retaliation that's taken place. Israel defending itself, but the proportionate aspects of it, that is where I think it gets quite contentious. And again, I will be talking about that today. But firstly, I do want to go through a few bits of housekeeping. This show happens every Wednesday. And I understand there are lots of people that subscribe to my channel because I do VR content. And you might be very against what I believe on this conflict and issue. And you might think, fuck this guy. And you know what? You're totally within your right to think that. Like, for me, this is not about ego. I don't go in with a perspective because I think I know better than other people. I have come to a conclusion. I'm going to pitch some of my thoughts. We can have a discussion about it. You might persuade me to think otherwise. But what you might also find is I'm a bit boring in the sense that I do have some like clear opinions on things, but then when I get into the nuances of it, it kind of sounds like, Myles, you're a bit like, yeah, in the middle, like could be this, could be that. And it's because life is very complicated. Also, I work in the UK. I have no military experience, and I have very limited knowledge on the conflict at hand. But yeah, I just want to say hi to Woody, who just spoke. He says, "Hi Myles, happy to see you still making content. I used to talk to you a lot in the Zeitgeist Movement TeamSpeak when you were working on the Universal Solutions project. We should definitely return to that sometime. And it's always wonderful to see people stopping back in. And actually, I did a lot of posts on my Instagram today, and I found myself talking about a lot of issues that I used to talk about, especially around activism. Because I see a lot of people online, especially like young influencers, that are trying to galvanize their audiences to take action, which I think is very important. But I always think that when you galvanize people, it should be done in a constructive way, which is empowering people in a way that's informing them, but also like empowering them to have their own autonomy and make their own decisions, as opposed to like shaming people. I don't like stuff like that, and patronizing people. I use ChatGPT a lot for when I do a lot of content writing, and I use it to sort of bounce my ideas off things. And quite often when I'm writing copy, and I used it a lot today when I was writing my copy for promoting this show and actually coming up with the title and stuff like that, the phrase I kept asking ChatGPT was like, don't make this patronizing. Like, I don't want to patronize people. That's the main thing. So yeah, I just got all that out of the way. And if there's anyone that's new that's watching, I want to say a massive hello to you. And already had people dislike this stream, which is what I love, because people will come in with their own judgments. And to be fair, you're absolutely within your right to do it. As I've said before, no ego. We just discuss this, we keep it mature, we keep it respectful, and I'm really grateful for the mods in the chat. And look, I don't want us to be banning people, but if there are people in here that do come out attacking people, and when I say attacking people, I mean attacking who they are. Attacking ideas is fine, and sometimes it will get heated. That's absolutely fine as well. So yeah, every Wednesday I do Myles Dyer live, and then every Friday I co-host with my buddy Brian Poole on PSVR Without Parole, on Gamescast Live, which is always a joy. Do subscribe to that channel if you haven't already. And then at the weekends I do Let's Plays of PSVR 2 games, so you get to see me in the world of virtual reality. I will be doing one, if not two games tomorrow night on Thursday, some extra ones, new ones coming out. One of them you'll find hilarious because it is like an anime like romantic novel. So I'm going to be in this VR world where I'm going to be, I assume, going on dates with anime characters, which I really don't want to be doing. But yeah, you get to laugh at me being awkward about that. So yeah, tune in for that. But also, I just want to say about the main topic for today to, although I say, keep it respectful. If you do have passionate views, do let them be known, but also just be respectful of the backwards and forwards with this sort of stuff, because this is how we're going to learn off each other, is by having this conversation. And as I said, the main reason I've set this up is just to give a space for people that aren't normally comfortable with engaging with this topic to do so. That's why we're doing this. I would normally on the show have a puzzle going on in the background, which is a puzzle of the thumbnail where you get to create it. I'm sure you'll understand. I didn't kind of feel comfortable doing that for today's live stream. Some of you might go, "Oh, Myles, why are you being worried about that?" And even coming up with the thumbnail for this show was very, very difficult. I ran it by with a few people I know, and I said, "Does this look tasteful?" It's really difficult to come up with, but I had an AI generated image created, and I wanted it to be tasteful, and hopefully you think that as well. Let's have a look here. I just want to say a massive hello to everyone in the chat. Yeah, Johnny Yankonik in the chat says this, and obviously we'll get to this in just a moment, which I think is a really interesting point. So he says, the only reason it is not proportional, I feel, in terms of Israel's response is because the thousands of rockets launched by Hamas, and correct me if I'm misrepresenting you, were blocked by technology, because they have the Star Wars, which is like this dome that takes out rockets from the sky. One sends smart bombs, the other shoots blindly. But yeah, the amount of bombs that Israel have sent is they actually did a comparison to like the nuke that was sent on Hiroshima, and it's absolutely incredible. But again, we will get to that. We will get to that. Titty Sprinkles, I always find it amusing saying this when we're talking about such serious issues, says, I always have the view when countries are fighting each other is to leave them to it. Having other countries butting in only escalates the problem even further. I mean, history shows that can be the case, but it also shows that it can't be the case, because World War II would have been very, very different if we didn't butt in on those occasions. So, yeah, I would disagree with that. Okay. Normally we would go through a lot of other things to begin with. Actually, we will do a couple of these things, right? So firstly, what we like to do every week is we do vitamin G, which is vitamin gratitude. And so every week, and I recommend people try this every day, is we take a moment to think about something that we are grateful for in life. It could be maybe an experience you've had, maybe it could be a person, family member, friend, colleague, or maybe a stranger, or maybe someone that gave you, I always say, good customer service. And thank you. Is it the Iron Dome? It wasn't the Iron Dome now, was it? Is that changed? Star Wars was a US defense during the Bush era. Okay, thank you for that correction. See, already learning. This is why I'm not a foreign secretary. But yeah, so I like to reach out to all of you in the chat and just take a moment to express anything that you are grateful for. And of course, you can keep it to yourself, because just thinking about it, just taking a moment to think about something you're grateful for can be really, really good for yourself. And for me, kicking things off, I am just incredibly grateful to live in a time of peace. I think it's been the longest time of peace for here in the UK, because when you see what goes on in other countries, I mean, I saw a story, I think it was yesterday, of a Palestinian doctor who he was being interviewed by Democracy Now. I don't know how many weeks ago it was, or it may have been a week ago, and he was saying he wasn't going to leave the hospital, and he was probably going to die there because he just wanted to help these people, and he died in the last couple of days. And it was when I saw his age, like he was born in 87, and just, I know it's always a bit of a selfish thing, but I think when it comes to empathy, we have to keep things real. If you connect with someone that has died or had a tragedy happen to him, it instantly feels closer. That's how human psychology works. And so when I saw that, yeah, I was like, Jesus, like, I know once upon a time living to your mid-30s was pretty good going, but in today's day and age, the idea that a doctor was murdered in a bomb, staying there to heal people, I just find it just really hit it home for me. And so people that have, so I guess my gratitude also extends that way as well. I'm grateful for people that have the moral courage to put others before themselves, because I try and put other people before me all the time. And to be fair, there might be situations where push comes to shove, I might do something that would be argued heroic, but I could never see myself doing that. But then I've never been in that situation, and so I have love and respect for people like that. Callie Timecat says, Vitamin G, a shout out to the colleagues in the sub team I work in. Lots of love, Callie, for your colleagues every week. That's really, really good to know. Moj says, my vitamin G this week is for pockets. It's good to have them to hold important things for you, and life can be much easier with them. They're simple yet very effective, especially secure pockets. I've had a few pockets. Actually, I will never forget when I was younger and I went, I must have been like Yeah, I must have been 17 or 18. I went out for New Year's Eve and I had this new denim jacket that I think my parents got me. And they had this like, it would look like an inner pocket, but it wasn't. It was just like a flap of denim. And I put my wallet in there and it obviously had fallen out through the bottom. And I had to spend the evening borrowing money off people knowing I'd have to pay them back. So it wasn't an enjoyable night. I think I went home and got home just before it went New Year. And that will always make me sort of think about the importance of pockets. I mean, I say good pockets. That wasn't even a pocket. But yeah, that's definitely it. Let's have a look. Kira says, Vitamin G, I got the recipe for a nice almond sheet cake. Who here does baking? I used to do baking with my late grandmother. I used to love it. But you know what? I couldn't bake to save my life by myself. I think the only baking I've ever done is triple chocolate brownie mix. But that's brownie mix. I mean, it is kind of baking, but it's holding your hand. Doing something from scratch. That I have a lot of Nick says, give women real pockets. And Mojo agrees. What's vitamin G? So just to repeat, Brannon, it means vitamin gratitude. So this is something I learned from my father's friend John, who just randomly in conversation as a throwaway term says, I like to practice vitamin G, just every day thinking about something you're grateful for. And so, on the show, we just take a moment every week to think about what we're grateful for. But this is something you should practice in your own time every day. Just take a moment. It's really good for your mental health. And it's not something that you always have to express openly. It's something that you can, you can just keep to yourself and think about. Serial Killer says, my wife always complains about the shallow depth in women's pants. And actually, speaking of Serial Killer, the Movember Game Cat, as the name suggests, has been doing something absolutely amazing this month because it is November or Movember. And so Serial Killer has been doing some hard work with some fundraising. And I actually only saw your message with the details after I did last week's show. So it's to promote a Game Cats Movember Foundation annual charity. This is done every year in Movember. And there are two links here. So there's one for the US, and then there's one for outside the US. So hopefully I get this right, okay? So this is Movember, and I'm going to say it's global. So if anyone's getting involved in Movember and wants to get involved, there we go. Do you know what? I think I've got that wrong. I think that's the US one, isn't it? I've already done it wrong. And then here is the other link as well. So I've put it in the chat there. So I just want to say a massive shout out to Serial Killer for doing that. Good on you, buddy. I'm really terrible at growing facial hair. But right, let's have a look. You made mulled wine from scratch on the weekend. Wow. That's good going. Karina says, and it's wonderful to have you back, by the way. I know you were on vacation. For a family member shielding me from some relatives-related drama whilst on holiday. Finding out now sucks, but would have sucked more if I'd found out a week ago. That is good, but oh man, I'm sorry that you've had to deal with that. And says, as for baking, I only bake in the sun. So there we go. And Serial Killer says, for clarification, anyone outside the US can sign up at Movember Foundation for their region, wherever it may be, then join the PSVR challenge so everything can be counted together. So it's all a part of a group for that. That's really, really, really good. Okay. Brandon says, tell her to wear men's pants then. Cool. Making your own bread is relaxing and tastes so good. Yeah, I mean, just cutting. There is something therapeutic about just cooking from scratch anyway, and there's just this real sense of satisfaction. And food always tastes better when you cook it yourself. I mean, I'll never forget when I worked for this documentary company and we had this away day, and we were in this like country house, and all we ate for the 3 days was like vegan food, but it was all like freshly prepared, and it was super healthy and super tasty. And I was like, I could literally eat this every day if I just And it's always easier when you cook with multiple people. Cool. That was it. So the first was global. And by the way, I've just noticed your avatar is very, very, very good. Are you updating it a bit more every day? So PSVR is the global challenge. Game Cats one is the US one. I just want to give you very well done, serial killer. And yeah, apologies for missing that last week. I need the dough to make bread from scratch. Whoops. Okay, and then also I talk about every week, I talk about Dyer Discoveries. And what I discovered this week, I had a letter through from the NHS for Our Future Health. And it's this scheme where you do some blood tests and other stuff, and then you're put on a DNA database, and then your DNA and blood samples are used for like long-term research into health. So it's a part of a massive like study for like long-term disease and that. I've signed up for it. I've got a blood test tomorrow morning. But straight away, there's always concerns about privacy and things like that. But I'm just like, at the end of the day, you've always got to weigh things up. And for me, if it means I can detect stuff about myself, that's good. And also if it helps humanity as a whole, then I'm all for it as well. But I know there are lots of people that would be really, really objecting to that kind of thing. So there is that. All right. That is it, I think. I think we're ready to just get on with the main topic. Israel, Palestine. So my first question to everyone in the chat, and I know we've kind of started talking about it already. I'm just curious to know, on a scale of 1 to 5, if 1 is like completely and utterly ignorant, and I don't think anyone is that, but let's just say you are. If 1 is like completely switched off, completely ignorant to everything, 1, and 5 is like just don't stop, super clued in. This is not about like what your knowledge is. This is just about your approach to it, like how much you're engaging with it. Where are you on that spectrum with the Israel Palestine conflict? As in the current like phase that we're in since the beginning of October. 1 is completely switched off, staying away, and if so, respect for you turning up today still for that. And 5 being completely clued in. I would say I'm probably a 4. Probably a 4. Only because once upon a time when I did a lot more of my activist-y stuff, I would have been on this all the time. And for me, I wouldn't be able to handle that at the moment. So we've got some people going outside the 5. We've got 3.5. What else we got? I took an intentional wide berth around this topic, so a 1. Okay, we got a 3. Trying to avoid it. Okay. So this is something I am at 3.5. I know it's happening, but I haven't been following it. Yeah. I find when it comes to important issues in the world, it's all about empowerment. I find people don't like, and we've got a lot of 4s coming in now, people don't like to be burdened with issues if there's nothing they can do about it. Because it's kind of like, what am I going to do with this? And so this is something I've mentioned before in the past. But like my slogan, Myles Dyer, engage, inform, inspire, which used to be entertain, inform, inspire, and then I changed it because it was less about my YouTube content and more about my philosophy. Just to quickly go over it again, and I will do a YouTube short about this. By the way, I hope you like my YouTube shorts. I've been doing them weekly now. I did one for World Kindness Day, which was on Monday. Hope you had a good kind day on Monday. But engage, inform, inspire is simply this. Engage. We live in a very, very noisy world. You need to become the signal amongst the noise. So when you speak, create content, do anything, you need to engage with people. Okay? Inform. Once you've got people's attention, you want to ensure that they have left the engagement with more information than what they than what they came to it with in the first place. So inform. You want people to be informed about it. But inspire, for me, is the most important thing. Because I could grab your attention. I could inform you about a really horrific thing going on in the world. But what use is that knowledge if you then don't know what to do with it? Because we all have autonomy. And I think this happens with a lot of political issues. And I also think it's why you have things like the just world hypothesis or just world theory, or the just world. I can't remember what the other term was, but it's the fallacy. It's the idea that when horrific things happen in the world, people will justify it, either saying it must be fake, or it didn't really happen, or they must have deserved it. And the reason people do that is people would rather have the comfort of... Well, basically, the world is chaotic. There is a lot of chaos. There's a lot of... Bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. And that's just because it's like luck of the draw. There is a lot of luck and circumstance in life. And that's quite a horrible thing to think about. And so people kind of justify it with, and it's a form of cognitive dissonance. And I think that does tailor back to when it comes to people who want to engage with certain issues. And I think the Israel-Palestine conflict is a perfect example of that. There are people that perhaps want to do something, but there is nothing I can do. I don't really know what's going on. And that's totally okay. And I know there are a lot of people that are saying, at the moment, thousands of babies are dying, and you're not switching off from your life to engage with this. And for me, it's like, on the one hand, it's like, I totally respect that. It's like, yeah, there are people that are literally having their jobs, they're going out having a good time, when there are kids in the world that are dying. Have they got their priorities right? But something I said on my Instagram story, and do follow me at Myles Dyer Official if you aren't already there, before doing this live show, and when I was kind of giving a preface for this, which is there are horrific things happening all of the time, all over this planet. And although I am a massive advocate for global empathy, I am not an advocate for intense, consistent, empathetic connection with all the world's trauma. Because if that was the case, we would cease to function. We wouldn't even have the mental or emotional capacity to deal with that. Because unfortunately, there is so much suffering in the world, and that is really, really tough. And so I do actually have a lot of compassion for people that don't wish to engage. However, I think if there is an ability to come to a solution and rally with people and put pressure on elected officials, going on marches, things like that, I think that's really, really important. And so I just kind of wanted to give that as a sort of a preface for everything that we're going to be talking about. S in the chat says, it's amazing how most Westerners don't know anything about this decade's conflict. Well, I would even argue that a lot of Westerners don't even know the history of their own countries. I think about what I learned when I did history when I was at secondary school. It was learning about Tudors and like kings and stuff like that, which I found incredibly boring. We don't really delve into the history of like British Empire and things like that. And obviously the British were a big part post World War in terms of the carving up of Israel and the evictions of Palestinians and how the settlements or the arrangements weren't made. But that history and I will admit, I don't know. I know somewhat about the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict, but I'm not an expert on it, and I don't know nearly enough. And it's difficult. And so I think that's a really, really fair point to bring up. And Karina, moderator, lovely. Just a reminder, all people, honest and respectful discussion, please. Absolutely. And Magic the Game Cat says, people feel powerless, and the conspiracy theorist in me thinks there are powerful people who just want that. Yeah, conspiracy theories are great ways because it's a way of adding order. It's much easier to think that there's a conspiracy. Sometimes things just happen. So, yeah. John Savino in the chat says, and by the way, I am going to bring up contentious things, people are happy to respond to it. So John says, how come the Palestinian people always never talk about the terrorist they have and how they treat women like trash? So that is an example where I don't know who John is. Maybe John has been to Palestine. Maybe he does a lot of research out there. That is an example where my initial thought of not what John is saying in terms of John, let's get John out of it, but in terms of how come the Palestinian people never talk about the terrorists? I've barely spoken to people who are on the ground in Palestine, but I've seen them on interviews and that. I know Palestinian people. I have a friend that's in Gaza who are horrified by what Hamas did. But I'm not going to therefore judge and go, oh, Palestinians are condemning Hamas. Unfortunately, when Hamas did that absolute horrific atrocity on October 7th, and I'm not even going to go into the detail. Well, we all know what they did. They did kidnapping. They did massacres. They beheaded. They raped. They did. I believe they were calling up the families of some of the victims, saying that we've killed so and so, and there were people in the streets that were chanting with glee at this, and I find that sick, horrific, and something that needs to be dealt with in terms of culturally. And when I say culturally, I don't mean Palestinian people, but I mean within that society, because to have that kind of vengeance where you do that to other people, it's fucked up. But I wouldn't blanket Palestinians. And then how they treat women like trash, I don't know. I know there are questionable practices with women, but then I don't know if that can be said about all situations and that. But yeah, anyway, I'm glad that was brought up, because that's this is what people are thinking about. Right, I've got some notes here, because I know this can get derailed in all sorts of sections, and a lot of people have said, fair play, Myles, for taking on this topic today. And as I said, I didn't come to this thinking, this is going to be an easy ride. This is going to be a very difficult topic to talk about, and so we're going to work through it. So, understanding the conflict, okay? I know that there are a lot of arguments about the fact that there's been a call for a ceasefire with what is happening at the moment, okay? Because at the moment there have been over 11,000 deaths in Gaza, majorly civilians, including women and children. There have been critical healthcare situations in hospitals like Al Shifa, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing any of these, and Al Quds. And the World Health Organization has warned about the safety crisis in Gaza, that there is literally nowhere safe. And it's been incredibly difficult because Israel was telling, I believe all the Gazans in the north to move south. Just move south. And I think that would have been 1 million people. Gaza's 2 million people. And it was thought that Israel were going to be doing sort of a ground invasion within days, and actually they delayed it. And Israel would argue they delayed it because they wanted to give more time. I actually think it was because of the international community were putting a lot of pressure on the fact of you're literally asking half a population to move, which is just insane. But a lot of people stayed behind, and there has been so much bombing and so much death. And what I've heard again and again, which is what I've heard not just during this phase, I've heard it every time there's been an Israel-Palestine conflict, which is Hamas are using people as human shields, and that is why civilians are dying. So when hospitals or ambulances are getting bombed, it's because it was being used by Hamas. I find that incredibly difficult to stomach. And the reality is, I don't know. A lot of the time, I don't know what is going on. But what I do know is that a lot of hospitals with doctors, with injured people that there are people that need operations and they don't have the supplies, so they're having to do stuff with local anesthetic. I saw a video of a baby with burns, and the doctor is trying to treat this baby, and they don't have all the supplies to give this baby the treatment the baby needs. It's been a lot of difficult things to see. But when I mention that, and it's why I did start with what happened on October 7th, it's not to say that is bad, therefore what happened to the Israelis is all right. It's all fucking horrific. And that is why the premise of this this live show is, where is the humanity? Because there is so much evil happening over there, so much suffering. And what happens all over the world is governments or organizations representing people take violent action, and it's innocent people that suffer. And I find it really, really sick. And so the toll of witnessing the suffering, and look, it is going to be difficult in this way. The massacre that happened in Israel happened in a day, whereas the bombardment of Palestine is happening over a long period of time. And so not only have more people died in Gaza than that died in Israel during that massacre, but the length of time does actually change the optics of what is seen in the media. It's happening over a long period of time compared to the initial massacre that happened. That is not putting a value on like one life is worth this many lives on the other side. I'm just saying a fact of that does actually impact the way that coverage is done. And so there's definitely been a lot of issues in the media. There's a balancing needed for the awareness with the emotional impact of graphic coverage. I remember I felt quite angry a couple of weeks ago because I saw a video. I'm not going to repeat what I saw. It came up on my timeline. It was retweeted by someone, an activist I follow and respect, and I connected with them through different causes. And I felt conflicted, and I didn't know how I felt about it. And I was chatting with people in Discord about it. And it was the idea that I felt conflicted because I was upset that I was shown that. It was on my timeline without any warning. But then you could argue, and I know there'll be people that say this, boo-hoo, Myles, that was uncomfortable to watch. There are people that are having to live with that. That's the real tragedy. And, you know, I can understand that argument. But it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about the way you bring people on board. But then on the other hand, I'm like, but me seeing it kind of like snapped me into place. Like, this is going on. Like, need to do something about it. But then it reminds me that during the Syria, what was going on in Syria, I was against the bombing in Syria of the UK government. I went on marches. And it's not that because I was against bombing, I was against any military intervention. For me, it was the UK government did not have a plan. They didn't say, this is the objective. And there are things like mission creep. Look at what happened in Libya and things like that. I didn't agree with the bombing. And I had people sending me the most horrific stuff on Twitter, like horrific videos of people being blown apart, as if that's going to convince me. So I disagree with you. So I'm going to show you something horrific because you don't give a shit about these people, Myles. For example, that might be their argument. And I just find that really difficult because once upon a time, and it's always give and take with these things. Once upon a time, the way that you got informed on the news is you'd turn on the television, you'd watch it for half an hour in the evening, and you would get the news bulletins. And it would be sanitized. They would show you stuff, but it would have gone through authentication. It would have gone through journalistic prudence and an editorial discussion, and then it would have been shown. We now live in a world where it's just a fire hydrant of just media. Some of it is not real, some of it is fake, some of it is doctored, some of it is taken out of context. And it's done in all ways because for a lot of people, they just want to win the argument and we're going to do it no matter what. For me, I just want to know what the truth is. And I want us to deal with the truth so we can get to a resolution. And unfortunately, it's incredibly complicated, which is the boring answer that we're going to go through again and again. Kira says, consent is still important. I wouldn't watch something graphic while being in a bad headspace. Yeah. I mean, even if you're in a good headspace, it's going to mess you up. Someone just said something in response to Johnny, so I'm just having a look. Shaking my head. If this happened... Okay, here we go. So this is great. This is great because what Johnny says is something I've thought about before. So Johnny says, shaking my head. If this happened in the US, as in what happened to Israel, it would have been the equivalent of 50,000 Americans, so you scale it up, which I don't think that's how it works, just because it's like that proportion of the population, you just scale it up to be that. I mean, you can do that. But let's just say 50,000 Americans. I would hope our government would make that country pay for their actions and never, ever think of trying it again. The problem with that is that, and this is one of the arguments I'd get to, is that happened after 9/11. And the people that did 9/11 were Saudis, weren't they? Or Saudi funded. And did go into Afghanistan, but did go into Iraq. And the amount of death and destruction and civilians that were killed, people that were displaced, people that were radicalized and terrorized, and I think made the region a lot less stable. So the idea that, and this is the thing, is it's like when you talk about, well, there was a famous US politician. It was like a presidential debate, I think it was, where one of them was asked about how would you. I'm gonna have a look this up quickly. It was the question of when did you stop beating your wife? It was done. So I'm pretty sure it was an American. I think it was a presidential debate, and there was a question asked about do you know what? I need to find out who this is. Someone might be able to help me in the chat. But the idea was, one of the candidates was asked by a journalist, this was in a debate, if your wife was like raped and murdered, you wouldn't support the death penalty, because they weren't for the death penalty. And so the framing of that question is, and I think he did actually answer it in a terrible way, which was, no, I wouldn't support the death penalty, which made him look weak, which is, okay, someone's raped and murdered your wife, and then you're just going to sort of like be okay with that? When the actual answer should be something along the lines of, yeah, if someone did rape and murder my wife, I'd want to kill him. That is why I wouldn't be responsible for the prosecution of the case, because I would be incredibly emotive. That is why we have laws, it's why we have a judicial system, and it's why those decisions are made by other people to take the emotion out of it, because in the heat of emotion are often when big, bad mistakes occur. And I find that happens a lot of the time with foreign policy. And I heard some really interesting articles the other day, actually, about when it comes to the destabilization of Libya or Iraq, or I think Syria is a different case. But when we look at all these things, the UK follows US foreign policy. The reality is about the call for a ceasefire. The UK government is never going to call for Israel for a ceasefire because America isn't. If Joe Biden came out tonight and said there should be a ceasefire, you bet the UK government would support it within moments later. But the issue is, and I've read this recently, which I thought was really interesting, is the UK following the US suit makes sense in some hands because the US is one of our closest allies. Obviously, we've had Brexit, so we're sort of distancing ourselves from the European Union. So when it comes to doing trade deals, but whatever the US does in the Middle East when it comes to foreign policy, they can totally fuck it up. And they don't actually have to worry about a lot of the consequences when it comes to extremism or refugees, because it all goes into Europe. And I believe this is what what has been said by Egypt when it comes to Palestinians, which is Europe can take the Palestinians if Gaza gets completely wiped off the face of the earth. America doesn't have to worry about that. So it's why I do think there is a responsibility for the UK to take its own stand. But obviously that takes it away a bit from what Johnny was saying, but hopefully that does kind of make sense. And what S says, hurt people is absolutely the case. And I haven't even been catching up with a lot of this chat. Waleed, the Game Cat, gave me a super chat. Let me just have a read of this. Waleed with the $5 Canadian. Thank you from Waleed. Now it is now a game cat, specifically a white tiger. I love this name. Miles, I admire you speaking on this. The injustice being done on Palestinians is shameful. Hamas is used as an excuse to do genocide using US weapons. That is the difference between the US and the UK. Is the UK, I don't believe, gives anything to Israel, whereas the US does fund Israel, and obviously the military industrial. The thought experiment, yeah. When did you stop beating your wife? Is the thought experiment, but it was actually, I don't know if it was based on, but it was a technique that was used in American debate. So that is it. Just having a look here. Anything Goes says, and I'm always careful when I start reading these in case you got Anything Goes. You have a horrific avatar. I don't know what it is. Invading Libya was not a disaster, led to ISIS terror attacks and refugee crisis, and David Cameron was largely responsible. Now they're calling him a safe pair of hands. Yeah, I actually got played on the radio in the UK a clip of David Cameron when he went to Libya with President Sarkozy of France, and he told the Libyan people, "We'll stand by you, we'll help you rebuild your country." And you look at what a disaster that was. Again, the elite politicians make decisions, and you know, a lot of people won't remember this, but in March 2019, Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader in Israel, was telling his colleagues, and I quote, "Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank." It's completely sick as fuck. And this is not excusing what happened on October 7th. Because, again, innocent people suffered. But the point is, politicians keep fucking things up for the rest of us. And, again, what is happening now is absolutely depressing. I had so many things I want to get through, and I'm kind of just going with the organic form of this conversation. But what I thought I would do is read you the letter I sent my MP at lunchtime today, which basically summarises a lot of my perspectives on the need for a ceasefire. Okay, so I'm going to read this. It's on my Instagram story if people want to read it afterwards. And then I'm happy also to then answer questions based on it afterwards. Hey, Clem Pandango. Hey, sorry, I missed the first half. Well, you've come in on a deep bit, Clem. Although we're just about to start a new section, so you're good. But yeah. Yeah, wow, almost an hour. How? I know. And we started this a lot earlier than other things, but it's just because we're talking about much more complicated things. I'm hating on my own country. I thought that was allowed. I mean, hating's a strong word. You can be critical. I'm very critical. But anyway, this is what I sent, and my MP is a very, very conservative that was never ever going to listen to me. But I wanted to think that I'd done something, because I always find we often complain online. With a lot of people are engaged in politics online, and we've spoken about this on a previous show. We're often very engaged in politics. We talk about it, what we care about, but I'm like, but do something about it. Like, I actually did leafleting for a political party against the ones that I don't like. I then had a bit of an issue where they kind of took me for granted, and then I didn't bother with it. But yeah, I'll read through this, okay, and then I'll respond to any comments along the way. Okay, so I said, "Dear John Redwood," who was my MP, "I hope this email finds you well. As your constituent, I am writing to express my deep concern and urge you to support the motion for an immediate ceasefire in the conflict between Israel and Gaza." And by the way, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of a ceasefire afterwards. So don't think that I'm here for a blanket statement going, ceasefire is the absolute way, and if you don't think that, shame on you. I'm not one of these people. I'm up for it. And there was someone who did call me out on it on Twitter. Completely fair. And I'm happy to respond to what they said. The situation in Gaza has reached a critical point. The relentless airstrikes have shattered infrastructure, killed thousands, and cut off an entire population from accessing basic necessities like clean water, food, and medicines. The World Health Organization has starkly stated that nowhere and no one is safe in Gaza. The death toll has surpassed 11,000, with a tragic proportion being women and children. Hospitals, once sanctuaries for the wounded, are now overwhelmed or non-functional. An effective ceasefire must encompass all dimensions of the conflict, including the critical issue of Israeli hostages. The path to lasting peace involves not only halting the violence, but also addressing such key concerns as the safe and prompt release of these individuals. Now, I will read out something that someone said in Respond on Twitter, because I thought I said something very, very non-controversial on Twitter. On Twitter, I tweeted earlier, I recognise that not everyone will agree with my stance on the current situation in Gaza and Israel. While I respect the diversity of opinions on this complex issue, and I do, I also acknowledge that not all perspectives are rooted in reason and compassion. There's a lot of anti-Semitism that is disgusting. It's seen on marches. It's a very small number of people, and there are people that are gleeful about the death of Israelis, which I find sick. But on the flip side, there are people that are completely okay with what Israel is doing and say it's justified, completely and utterly justified, which I don't agree with as well. I said, in the face of such immense tragedy, I believe it's crucial to move beyond mere complaints and take constructive action. That's why I've reached out to my MP, urging them to support the motion for a ceasefire tonight. I am just one voice in this, though. If you find yourself feeling frustrated or complaining about the situation, I encourage you to find your voice. Reach out to your MP and share your thoughts. That is not saying, if you agree with me, reach out to your MP. That is me saying, if you think there shouldn't be a ceasefire, you should message your MP. Like, that is a democracy. What you believe, if you're complaining online, tell your MP. Make your voice known. That is what a democracy is like. It's really, really important. I had someone that works quite senior for an anti-extremist organisation that said this is a very thoughtful statement, Myles, which meant a lot. Zahid, who I'm going to try and get on my show at some point. But then I did have someone, and by the way, I'm not going to say their name. I don't know if they're watching, but like total love and respect for them, even if I disagree with their sentiment, but I don't necessarily disagree. Well, we'll get to it. They just basically responded to me and they said, ceasefire and what? They were already in a ceasefire on October 6th. Then Hamas came into Israel, slaughtered and raped people and took hostages. Why not call on Hamas, a literal terrorist organisation, to free the hostages? And I just responded and I said, I actually mentioned the need to release the hostages in my email. You are welcome to read it and join the discussion on tonight's show. If you're watching, by the way, say hey. We'd love to say hey to you. And that is all in good faith. I see so much this idea of like, why not call on Hamas? My feeling is this, right? It's twofold. One is we should be calling on Hamas. That is a part of a ceasefire. And there has been actually evidence reported that Netanyahu actually refused an option to get hostages to just deal with the bombing instead. But the other part of it is this. Our government is supporting what Israel is doing right now. Okay? Our government is supporting what Israel is doing right now. I don't agree with what Israel is doing right now. Therefore, I'm taking it up with my government. If my government was supporting what Hamas was doing, I would be fucking livid and having a go at them for supporting Hamas. I have issues with them supporting other questionable organisations around the world. Okay? So when people kind of say this, like, why aren't you calling on Hamas and that? Or like, you know, why are you bringing this up with government? Why weren't you doing this when the massacre happened? When the massacre happened, I was absolutely horrified by what was going on. And I thought, yeah, Hamas needs to be stopped. And Israel had a right to respond. But now looking at what's happening and the thousands of people that are dying, our UK government is not enabling Hamas. I mean, we could get into blowback and stuff like that. I mean, you know, I see a video. I'll get to this other super chat in a minute. Thank you, whoever sent that. You know, I see a video of some young kid who's just had their parents killed and all their family, and they're crying. And I've seen this again and again over the years. Would it surprise me if they grew up and went, fuck the people that killed everyone I love. I hope I want to get my revenge. I don't agree with revenge, but would I understand it? Yes, I would understand it. Am I justifying it? Am I excusing it? No. But that is the concern. It's blowback. This is what happens when we have drone bombings that are done. You know, we think there's a target at a wedding and we kill an entire family at a wedding. You don't think that has rippled effects? You don't think that, creates more extremists? We said hurt people hurt people. Mojo with a £10 super chat. Thank you very, very much. Great topic to get people talking about, and thank you for all your info on this topic. And by the way, I don't have all the answers here. I am one person with an opinion. Don't use me as like an expert on foreign policy. I'm just mentioning this. But yeah, I'm just sort of making it clear. But anyway, and Waleed says there was no ceasefire. There's been illegal occupation since 70 plus years, and also every 2 years Israel bombs Gaza, controlling the population growth and killing innocents. I think they used to call it mowing the lawn, which is fucking sick, man. Yeah, I mean, look. But the thing is, regardless of the ceasefire question of if it existed or not, and I'm not saying Waleed means this, what Hamas did was fucking despicable. And sorry, my language, but I don't think my language does even justice for the horrors that we saw. But look, going back to my letter or my email, because we're in the digital age now. I said, amidst this dire situation, a YouGov poll, a poll in the UK, back in October revealed that 76% of Britons advocate for an immediate ceasefire, with only 8% in disagreement. This overwhelming majority reflects a growing public sentiment that transcends political lines, which it does, and speaks to our shared values of empathy and humanity. As the crisis worsens, I believe this call for peace has only grown stronger. Last weekend, we had 300,000 people take to the streets, okay? Johnny says, I see one option, live in fear or deal with it. Exactly. And I think one way of living with fear is lashing out and, like, murdering civilians. Dealing with it is building peace. Building peace is hard. You just got to look at what happened with the Troubles in Ireland and things like that. Things always end with a political, non-violent solution. It really is. And the idea that, like, violence and, like, attacking is strength, I don't agree with it. I do think, I'm not a pacifist, by the way, though. I completely believe in self-defense. And, there's a lot of people that talk about, what was it during World War II? Was it Dresden? Was that what it was called? Was it Dresden? The bombing of Dresden in World War II, right? So the bombing of Dresden was a joint British and American aerial bombing attack on the city of Dresden, the capital of the German state of Saxony, during World War II, in 4 raids between 13th and 15th of February in 1945. Dropped more than 3,900 tons of high explosive bombs and incendiary devices on the city. The bombing and the resulting firestorm destroyed more than 1,600 acres, which is 6.5 square kilometres, of the city centre. Up to 25,000 people were killed. Now, people say, as, with what's happening with Israel, well, in Dresden, when we took the Nazis on, innocent people have to survive. And there are politicians saying this. But do you know what happened after World War II? There was the setup of the Geneva Convention. International law was set up. So this stuff doesn't happen again. This idea that, like, you get attacked and therefore, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, so it doesn't matter. And a term that you may have heard, but some of you may not have heard it, and I'm happy to explain. Collective punishment. It's the idea that when a country attacks someone, you're just going, well, they're the enemy, so, we just kill whoever. So the babies that are dying in Gaza, well, that's just the price they pay. No, that's collective punishment. That goes against international law. And as Essa said here, Dresden happened before the creation of the UN International Law on Wars. Because you could say all the innocent people in Iraq who got killed by the US, UK, the West, when invading and occupying Iraq, right? Are we saying now that, they could just start bombing the US? Well, they wouldn't, because obviously they don't have the capacity. But let's say they did. And this is another big part of it. Israel has an immense military force compared to Gaza. It's not the other way around. And that also comes to play as well. And obviously there was Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as Callie Tonecat says. Anyway, I'm gonna continue anyway. But also there's a fair argument that just because 76% of Britons advocate for immediate ceasefire doesn't mean the government should do it. That's why we have members of parliament. They are there to represent us, not in doing everything that we want, but using their expertise to make decisions. But I still think public opinion should be taken into consideration, especially when it's as high as it is. I go on. Your role as a Conservative MP places you in a unique position, because Conservatives are currently in power here, of influence and responsibility. Supporting a ceasefire is not just a political decision, it's a moral stance that aligns with the values of our nation and the wishes of your constituents. It's an opportunity to demonstrate the UK's commitment to peace, justice, and international humanitarian standards. And Johnny, honestly, Johnny, love to you, dude. And this is what I love. And to be fair, this is what I loved when I used to do videos on politics, whether it was about talking about Brexit or Donald Trump and stuff. I would have conversations. I'd have people that were completely against what I believe or stay, but they would watch the videos because they feel I'm not misrepresenting. You know, I'm not here just going to straw man you and break down your ideas. Like, I want to have an honest conversation. And yeah, we are definitely on opposite sides, and I'm happy to keep going backwards and forwards on this, and I appreciate that you love my videos. But this is what it's about. This is like how we come to solutions, because I find there is a lot. I know it's such a cliche, there's more in common than what divides us. But the reality is, at the end of the day, we all want the same things. We want peace, we want stability. We just have different values or perspectives on how we get there. But I like being challenged, and hopefully you like being challenged too. I also respect we've got some asymmetrical warfare of ideas here, because you're having to type on your keyboard and it's hard to get tone of voice over and expressions. I'm here with a microphone. I'm a gob on a stick, you know. Unruly cat. I love these images. I'm rushing with work, but just wanted to send you all the love, Myles. Using a platform to push for peace is the best someone can do. Wishing you all the best and super proud of your work. Well, thank you. And I am mindful there's a lot of VR people that are at the end of today going to hate this. But as I said, I wanted this to be an opportunity where a lot of you out there perhaps wanted to engage with this but don't know how, and maybe this will just make you feel a bit more comfortable about it. I mean, not comfortable but uncomfortable, but more knowing about it. Anyway, I'm going to continue with this. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres was rightly pointed out that the actions of Hamas cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. So this is what I've said. The scale of civilian casualties challenges the notion of a proportionate response. Accountability is essential, but the immediate need is to stop the loss of innocent lives. And the only way that's going to happen is if the bombing stops. It's the only way. Now, this next paragraph is one of my key points. And this is genuinely what has really, really, and I'm trying not to swear, annoyed me with UK politicians, American politicians, global politicians. There's this call for we're not gonna campaign for a ceasefire. We're going to campaign for a humanitarian pause. And what is that? It's a moment to allow the humanitarian aid to come in to Gaza and help people, right? I'm going to read you this paragraph and then I'm going to elaborate on it, although I don't think it will need much elaboration. But this is what do you think would happen if Israel was disarmed, as in didn't have a military? They would get terrorist attacks all over, probably. They would. It's an incredibly volatile part of the world, and Israel deserves complete security in the region. That's what I believe. But I'm not a foreign policy expert, but that's just my sense of it. There's a lot of people that think very bad of Israel. So this is what I said. Moreover, the notion of humanitarian pauses is a glaring contradiction. It is nonsensical to provide civilians with food, water, and medicine, only to then leave them vulnerable to subsequent bombings and violence. It is a moral travesty to offer a temporary relief while failing to address the continual threat to these people's lives. A ceasefire must not only stop the immediate violence, but also ensure that these humanitarian efforts are not rendered meaningless by ongoing conflict. And what I mean by this is, I think it's sick that our politicians are like, let's have a humanitarian pause. Let's get these, these 2 trucks in with food and then let it continue. So what we're doing is, we're going to patch up the kids. And I am going to say this now, and just close your ears for 20 seconds if you don't want to hear this. The video I saw was a lineup of dead kids on the floor with their brains exposed who'd been bombed to shit. A fucking travesty, man. Kids. Kids are not just symbolic. They are the actual definition of innocence. That could have been me. We're in a lottery in terms of where we get born in the world. We are victims or victors of circumstance. And the idea that you patch these kids up. I see kids babies in incubators being put close together because they're running out on oxygen or all the supplies. Yeah, we'll give them some supplies and then we'll continue with the bombing. Get the fuck out of here. That's genuinely how I feel. I think humanitarian pauses. Am I for humanitarian aid? I am, but don't do this humanitarian pause shit. Let's patch them up, and then and then carry on with the bombing. That is the thing that makes me the most angry with this. I'm just looking up something. No, I was trying to find. There was Frankie Boyle made a joke about it, which was the idea of. I'm not even going to get into it. He gave a very triggering subject, but it was the idea of you set up clinics for dealing with issues whilst allowing the issues still to go rampant. But anyway. A ceasefire must not only stop the immediate violence, but ensure that these humanitarian efforts are not rendered meaningless by ongoing conflict. Okay? Next paragraph. This is a moment for moral leadership. Supporting the ceasefire aligns with our nation's values and the overwhelming public opinion. It is a chance to contribute to a much-needed step towards peace and stability in a region that has seen too much suffering. I urge you to consider the overwhelming call for a ceasefire, both internationally and from within our own borders. This is an opportunity to make a significant difference, to stand on the right side of history, and to reflect the will and moral compass of the people you represent. Thank you for your time and consideration. I trust that you will make a decision that aligns with our shared values of empathy, compassion, and a commitment to global peace. Sincerely, Myles Dyer. So that was my email. In terms of what happened, there was a vote in Parliament, and the result was 293 voted against the motion, 125 for a ceasefire. So our government overwhelmingly voted against the ceasefire. And that's democracy. That is democracy. I don't agree with it, but that is how democracy works. And if people thought that the protest last weekend of 300,000 was big, it's only going to get bigger as the scenes come out more and more. And yeah, this is exactly it. There are wars going on in Sudan, Burma, parts of West Africa still going on in Ukraine. It's really sad. It's really sad. Yeah, the depressing thing is wars with civilian casualties are going on over the world. Humanitarian aid, Karina says, doesn't work in an effectively a totally a war zone. It has its place, but not. Yeah, exactly. It definitely does have its place. But yeah. Waleed, I'm impressed by your in-depth knowledge in this matter and ability to see the true motives. But I don't know if I understand the true motives. Like, I suspect stuff, but then it can get quite conspiratorial. The reality is, a lot of the time, it's people that due to their environment, they believe they're doing the right thing because we're all nurtured with our environment, with ideologies, with perspectives, and that can lead to you doing different things. I am someone that doesn't have ego, and I don't necessarily think I am better than other people. Some people I think I am better as, like members of Hamas who, you know, riddle in those disgusting acts. I'm definitely better than them. I mean, that's not a high bar. You'd be probably glad to hear that I'm better. But you know, Myles, how much better? Not just a little bit better, right? Because that'd be horrible. But like, some people would see that as weakness, which is no. Strength is thinking that you're right. You know, power play in conversation, always feeling like, you know, this, you know, you're right. That is what strength is. And in some cases it is, but that's just not the sort of person I am. With the $2 Canadian says the aftermath clips of the Al Shifa airstrike killed me. Yeah, I couldn't watch it. Let's have a look. Lots going on here. Sorry, I hate to have dead air, but yeah. Cali Timecat says, one quote I remember and love about wrongdoing, right doing. There's a field, I'll meet you there. Jalaluddin Rumi. I first heard it a few days ago, after 11th September 2001, when political tension was high. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the military-industrial complex. I mean, yeah, they love war. They love war. Any chance to sell munitions. I had a GIF years ago. I'm going to see if I've got it on my computer, and I'll see if it will even work on this screen if I bring it up there. Let's have a look. It's under thoughtful images, I'm sure. Man, I've got so many memes from years ago. Oh man. Some of these are probably really outdated. Oh no, this is it. Is this going to work? There you go. This GIF I had. Oh man, I don't know how long ago I had it. I just find it incredibly depressing. But I think it's really powerful. When was this? 2018. I had it longer than that. Yeah. But yeah, really powerful. Unfortunately. There is no profit in peace. Absolutely. Right. Okay, guys. I had a massive list of things. I would recommend that if you're on Instagram, do follow me on Instagram, which is Myles Dyer Official, as you can see there. In my story, I had a few great posts that I shared, but one of them was of a user that went, I'm not an international human rights lawyer. I'm not like an expert on foreign policy. I'm just some dickhead talking on video like most people out there. I wouldn't trust my opinion on the Israel-Palestine conflict, but I would trust the perspective of, and then he lists a load of organisations, the United Nations, the Red Cross, Save the Children. I don't think he mentioned Save the Children, but all these ones that have been calling for a ceasefire. And I think that comes down to it at the end of the day. You need to look at who are calling for a ceasefire and who are not. What are their motives? What are their perspectives? Where are they coming from? That is not to say, by the way, that if you are calling for a ceasefire, it means you're right. Like, all your motives and that are right. And if you're, because Hamas would probably want a ceasefire. They probably would. And that is the complexities of it. Having a ceasefire does give Hamas the opportunity to then fight back. But that's why it's difficult. And I've seen people talk about, like, if this was all... Actually, this is the other thing I wanted to say. If the issue was about getting hostages back, they should be sending in secrets, like the undercover forces, to get them out. Because this is the thing I don't understand. and I probably mentioned this earlier in the live show, is if terrorists like kidnap people that you loved, and they took them to a shopping centre here in the UK, let's say it was in the UK, or if it was in the US, here in the US, and it got surrounded, would you want just like the US government to like open fire on the building and kill them all and go, sorry, but they were human shields? They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that because there'd be an absolute outcry. The only reason it's been allowed to happen in Gaza is because they're different people. They're a different population. That's a fact. That is a fact. This was the thing I was talking about earlier. And again, this is not to say this is absolute truth, but this is like, it's very, very, very complicated. Very, very complicated. Let me load it here. Is this going to work? There we go. Netanyahu rejected ceasefire for hostages deal in Gaza, sources say, in early talks to take a tough line. And you know what? Political pressure is difficult. Because as soon as that absolute horrific tragedy happened, because Hamas says, if you stop the bombing, we'll release the hostages. The political weakness of a leader of, oh, so they've come, they've murdered, they've raped, they've taken hostages, but we're going to do a deal with them to let them back. I understand the political pressure not to do that. But the thing is, I've seen a lot of family members of people taken hostage saying the bombing has to stop as well. But to be fair, there's probably a lot that are saying, no, it must continue. It's difficult. It's really, really, really difficult. By the way, I am reading all these comments. There's so much discussion, and it's just like, because I want to make sure we're keeping with some kind of fluent sort of conversation going on here. But I want to say thank you for everyone for this. Nick says, I'm not saying anything that's happening is good, Waleed. I didn't see the discussion between you two, but just saying that there's more nuance than just yelling ceasefire. And I agree. I have obviously made the case for ceasefire. That is not just saying like ceasefire and then, because there will be some people that think if you do a ceasefire, the pain stops and it's everything is fine. It's like, no, ceasefires are very difficult. They need to be done under conditions. There need to be negotiations, and that is very, very difficult. It was going to be very difficult to have a ceasefire straight after what had happened to Israel. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to look for a ceasefire after what's happening with Gaza. And I even saw some footage earlier today of a controlled... do you know what? I'm not even going to mention it. The reason I'm not going to mention it is I often see stuff on social media, which is probably true. Like there was an image of... someone had sent an image of like their sister who had died and her kids or like close family members in the bombing. And I wanted to share it because it was a human story. They've been brave enough to talk about it. I wanted to share it. But a part of me was like, I can't share this because it's not verified. And that feels like a really cold thing to say of like, am I calling him a liar? No, I'm not calling him a liar. My point is, there is just so much noise out there. There is so much noise out there. And I don't want to be responsible for putting stuff out there that I don't know the full context of. Hasib Mirza says, it's not complicated though. There is an oppressor and the oppressed. So I would say that it's not complicated to say that, but it is complicated on how you address it. Because even if you did have a really straightforward, like, just because like spelling, like describing what to do might be simple, the actual persuasion, political persuasion, persuading communities and populations, that is difficult. That is where it gets complicated. So I do think it's a bit of a cop-out, you know. But then again, you might be agreeing with me when you say that. You might be saying like it is simple what needs to happen, but Yeah. I've been told that there's no real proof presented about the rape and beheadings. I know that there were things that came out that weren't confirmed, like the 40 something babies that were beheaded, which wasn't the case. But I do think that the beheading stuff was actually... I do know of journalists that have... Even journalists that I don't necessarily agree with politically said they have seen it. But yeah, look. Nick says, I feel like wars these days are more affected by media. Can't lose the war because you'll get made fun of on Twitter. That's more important than the actual war. Yeah, well, people just want to be right. And the thing is, like, and this is why I like having this show on here, is there will be people spilling over from Twitter, and we've had people come in that I don't know. I'm curious to know if anyone's in here who's never watched my show before, because I want to say hello to you and all welcome. But, like, for me, one of the most empowering things I ever went through in my life was just coming to terms with the fact that I don't know everything, and I'm totally cool with that. And I'm totally, like, just not getting defensive about everything. I'm always willing to learn. It gets difficult when I'm against people that want to be right about everything. But yeah. Sorry if I'm really behind everyone. I'm just going down this. One thing I'm glad about is the person who described the pro-Palestinian march last week as a hate march has been sacked, shouldn't have been appointed last year. Well, she was already sacked on the previous government. Suella Braverman is a despicable human being. And I don't say that about a lot of people, but genuinely just trying to rile stuff up. But again, like, that's another example of, like, intellectual honesty. There are people that are like, the march can't be brought into question in the slightest. The reality is the march was predominantly, like, peaceful, and it was with people that are calling for a ceasefire, want hostages to be released, have all good intentions. But within it, there are certain people that were either saying anti-Semitic things or calling for the eradication of Israel and all this sort of stuff. And I don't support anyone that supports any kind of violence or eradication of people. Anything goes. This is a great question. Do you think the protests in London are helping or harming the pro-Palestinian cause? Oh, man, do you know, I really wish I had this clip. I deleted a clip off my phone. Did I delete it? I deleted it. There was a really great clip I had of a gentleman. Actually, I retweeted it. So I'm going to go and find it, and then I'm going to dig it up. And hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Do you know, it's really weird tweeting about, like, playing Galaxy Kart and VR in between, like, clips about Gaza and stuff. This was it. Right, let me see if I load this up and if it works. Let's have a look, people. Let me know if you can hear this. Wait, it's not.
11, and then you'll be heading to Hyde Park.
You can hear that, right?
Now, we've got the silence here at 11, and then you'll be heading to Hyde Park to be part of the pro-Palestinian demonstration. Why is it important for you to be there as well?
Yes, it's been termed a pro-Palestinian demonstration. I think it's a pro-peace demonstration. There are no sides in this. My United Nations medal is inscribed in the service of peace, and that is what we're all about. Old soldiers on Armistice Day calling for armistice, and there can't be anything wrong with that.
I mentioned there's been a lot of debate about the policing, about the politics of this all. Has that been a...
Can you guys hear this, by the way? I just want to make sure I'm not playing this and just sitting here in silence. You can hear that, right? No one's confirmed it. Oh, you can hear it. Thank you, Karina. Thank you.
A distraction, do you think?
Sometimes there's too much politics. We have elections and votes ahead of us, but that's by the by. These moments of stillness, these moments of silence is to allow us individually, to put things back together just for a little while.
And you talk about you individually, but as the Prime Minister said, this is a very important day in terms of unity for the country and a sacred day, he put it.
Yes, to realise that we are answerable for what we do and what we say, for our past as well as our present, as well as our future. So much was got wrong in the past, in past conflicts, in past warfare. So much is going wrong today. It's up to us, and we owe it to those who went before, that we do better. We will hear read, "In Flanders Field the poppies grow." Everybody remembers the first verse. Very few people remember the last verse. It's a challenge from the dead to the living. To you, from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shan't sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Field. And so we're carrying the torch, we're answering the call, we are trying to do better.
Okay, thank you.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. Because I also find because Armistice Day was an interesting one, because people say it's like respecting the dead, and people get very protective about this sort of stuff, and people often forget about the whole reason we do it in the first place. Very, very wise. Yeah, I love this clip so much. It's on my Twitter. Check it out. I mean, I'll link it. This is actually the clip here. Haggis UK, what a name. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful clip. Yeah, there was a recommendation by Hazib, who says, "I highly recommend everyone read Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky. Phenomenal book, should be a must reading to understand the role of media in building division and justifying bloodshed." Absolutely. So who are the bad guys? Well, this is the thing. Like, I don't like... It's like when you call people monsters. I don't like calling, like, even murderers, or I'm not even going to get into it, horrific people. I don't call them monsters. I say they've done monstrous things, because by calling them monsters, you take away their humanity. And what I mean by that is like their responsibility. Has it been confirmed that Hamas is operating out of hospitals? Because it's pretty despicable. This is the thing that we hear again and again, is that they're operating in hospitals. I have seen loads of reports from doctors saying they aren't here. And so, and you know, Israel needs to show the evidence. Karina says, thanks, Myles, for covering. Everyone should think about how to contribute to the discussion action, but even more so those who have even a bit more of a platform to do it. Yeah, you noticed the KZ earbuds. Yeah, I used these when I was on tour. Right. Listen, everyone. John Oliver talked about an Israeli and a Palestinian man that had both lost children in this conflict coming together with others for peace. Beautiful story and heartbreaking. Please do link me to that, Nick. I would love to see it. Man, I can't imagine. So difficult. What a nice gentleman. I'd have biscuit tea with him. Me too. I mean, I'd love to... Do you know what? Shall I see if he'd come on the show? Shall I try and get him to come on the show? I've got a list here of guests. I have one guest planned for December 6th, actually, that I'm really excited about. Rev Tim Daplyn. War and peace will be the topic. I'd love to get him on. He'd be wonderful. All right. Am I on Threads? I am on Threads. I don't use it, though. I barely use it, but I am on there. Myles Dyer Official. And Robert Sapolsky's new book, Determined, if you really want to understand why people do the things they do. Oh, man. More recommendations. This is really, really good. Another super chat. Fifth. With the Australian $2. Appreciate all your shows, whatever the subject. I appreciate you as well. Listen, everyone, we've been going on for 90 minutes. I mean, to be fair, we were going to have to go on for a long time to talk about this subject. I hope this has been somewhat helpful. I had all these notes and I've kind of just broken away from it and bounced around. But look, here's a few key takeaways. There are going to be people that watch aspects of this live stream and log off with complete rage because they don't like what I'm saying. That is totally fine to not like what I'm saying, but know that I come at this with good faith. I just want to have conversations. I want to discuss things. And although I talk confidently about these things, I don't know everything. And the reason I talk confidently about the things I've done is I've given it a lot of thought, but I'm always willing to accept that perhaps there are things that I've got wrong. So there's that. Please do build up your presence on Threads if you can. Okay. Lots and lots of stuff in the chat. Everyone's saying yes, please, to getting the Reverend on. All right, we'll try that. Looper says, you're right, Myles. Ability to do monstrous things is part of normal human nature, and it's a crucial thing to keep in mind. I just find that when you say they're a bad person, it's kind of like shuffling it away in a file, just going like, that's done. Like, when people say they're sick or they're evil, it's not actually getting to the root cause of why things have been done. Hasib Mirza says, regardless of position, I'm glad that people are actually talking about this rather than throwing their hands up and turning a blind eye on the matter. Exactly. It's about engaging, like having these conversations. Because you know what? Those that are doing horrible things would rather that we were switched off and not engaging. And I think critical mass and awareness is important. I think you might be ready for your cold shower just about now. No, I'm doing all right. I'm an apple tree. Sorry, I have no idea what's going on there. Everyone has the potential for good and evil. But look, we all do. It's all about where people come from. I have done some horrible things in my life. Like, I think about like horrible things I've said to people, mistreating my parents, like when I was a kid and like in my teenager years. I've done some really bad things that occasionally I'll roll around in my head and I'm just like, I just... I can get incredibly depressed about. And my favourite phrase about this is the best kind of apology is change behaviour. It doesn't excuse what's happened, but it means that we all have an ability to turn things around if we can. Grumpy Williams says, as the youth say, Myles, you a real one. I try my best. Cold showers I do maybe need to get back into. Atmos VR says, really missed not being able to participate more today. Thanks, Myles, for creating more discussion about this difficult situation. I just want to say, man, I love you all, and I don't have all the answers. And I don't know if nervous. I wasn't nervous about doing this live show. I wasn't nervous, but I was incredibly sensitive to it, and I wanted to make sure... Like, firstly, I didn't want to just come on and say, I believe we should have a ceasefire and just make arguments for a ceasefire. I mean, I have done that. I've sort of given one perspective and gone through some of the issues. But hopefully by doing it, I've made it clear that it's not, here's a ceasefire, just do it, and then it all is solved. It's like, no, there are complexities, but here are complexities with what are going on right now, and the humanitarian pause is the thing that just does my head in more than anything. Not because I think humanitarian pauses aren't important, but in the context of then you resume bombing, I think is absolutely disgusting. And there are lots of things I wanted to talk about that I've seen, but I didn't want to bring them up because, firstly, I haven't had them 100% verified, and I want to be responsible. I want this to be like a starting point in conversation. You can then go out and engage with stuff as much or as little as you want. But I don't want, in here to be like, yeah, Myles talked about a lot of stuff, but there was a lot of kind of like by things that were sort of thrown out there. That's just not helpful. Let's just deal with the things that we can be more certain of. But listen, everyone, I am going to wrap it up there. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has been live in the chat and engaged, been incredibly respectful. There were some heated exchanges, and if I'm trying to remember who it was right at the top, that was it John that I was speaking to, who had a really cool, like, did he have a moped or something on his image? But he says, love your videos, even though we had like a strong disagreement. I really want to find, oh, there he is. It was Johnny. It looks like a cool bike or something. I don't know if Johnny's still here or if he left, but yeah, look, this is a safe space to have those disagreements. But yeah, wanting people to live is what I hear. So yeah, I want justice. I want despicable organisations to be dismantled. I want Hamas to be gone because what they're doing is gross and horrific. I want the people of Israel to be safe. But I want the Palestinian people to have autonomy. And that's just not to say, oh, just give them autonomy. It's a difficult process. Snacks says, have you heard of world sickness and the alchemical heart? Have I said that right? Alchemical heart. Your heart grows until it hits the barbed wire of the ugliness of the world and shrinks back down, but it's a practice that builds your heart capacity. I love that. That's a nice thing to think about. And thank you, Woody. And Woody, I kept trying to like bring in stuff that you said throughout. I had been reading it and that. So yeah, a massive thank you to everyone in the chat. Massive thank you to my mods, Karina, Mojo, Callie Timecat. Sorry. Thank you, everyone. It's been a difficult topic, but I also want to say for all of you that are listening or watching, and you know, we were talking at the start, this is for people that find this uncomfortable. There are going to be many people that are watching this that are uncomfortable from this, and it's okay to be uncomfortable. And you didn't want to speak or say anything. That is totally cool. Like, you know, it's just good to connect on these kind of issues. So yeah, this is the randomness of Myles Dyer Live. Last week we talked about pizza toppings. This time we talked about Israel and Palestine. But the point is, every week we just engage in topics. Sometimes they're going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes they're going to be about the most unimportant things in the world. But we do this together, and I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful for you. So on that note, we're going to wrap things up. I am going to say this now just because we're at the end now. Do hit the like button. I'm really curious to know who's the person that comes in at the start of every live stream and gives a dislike button. I do have a suspicion who it is, but you know, no evidence. Can't find out in the analytics. I don't envy the mods for dealing with this stream. That's funny, Nick. Yeah, it was good. I don't think there was anyone that needed to be banned or anything. Would be good to catch up sometime. I went by the name TeamSpeak. I remember using TeamSpeak. Good old days of TeamSpeak. Tally Coin Cat. Yeah, I'm so sorry. So as we always do, going to wrap this up, and it's time now for your final thoughts. Love you all. Love, respect, empathy, and adios. Till next time. Hey everyone, thanks so much for the show. Is enjoy the right term to use for something like this? I did enjoy it because also I think actually just engaging with a lot of this stuff, it's not something you can really talk. I don't really talk about it at work. I don't really talk to a lot of people about this just because of the way that I live about stuff. Yeah, coming up with the thumbnail was really difficult because, as I mentioned, I was using ChatGPT to come up with some thumbnails, and the initial design based on the title, it came up with a really cool image to begin with. It came up with this. Actually, I'll show you these two. I'll show you these two images. I just didn't know what was tasteful. The reason I didn't use these two images was because that there's a hand for Israel, and it would have been covered by Myles Dyer Live, which felt like really, really not tasteful at all. But yeah, these were the two. What do you think of these? So we got this one. That was one of the ones I was looking at. I like that quite a lot. I like that they're. It's amazing. I just said this is the title of the of the Myles Dyer Live. Come up with a thumbnail for it, and this is the thumbnail it came up with in like 60 seconds. And I love that they're both touching the sun in the middle. So that was one of them, and then the other one was this. Which I didn't like. The sort of the birds are nice, but like the roots and that going around the arms and that, and also I kind of like the hands grabbing out, but yeah, I wasn't entirely sure about it. But like this is amazing that what you can do with AI. And so the one I went with was this. That was the one I got. So I got it done as a square image, knowing I could then put it to the side over there. But then I would need to carry it across, and so then I did a lot of copying and blurring out of the ground. So you can see in the bottom left corner, like there's stripes. So it's a very poor job of where the blurriness and that. But I actually thought in the end it was quite a good thumbnail. Also, I've got a list here that I'm going to weigh very quickly so you can't read it, of guests to come on the show. I've got a lot of different guests that I'm very, very excited to reach out to this weekend. I'm also, before the end of the year, going to look at merchandise, getting some merchandise set up. Because we have the designs. We just... Were there two thumbs on the right? Was that what you were asking about? Yeah, I looked at it, actually. Yeah, one of the hands had two thumbs on the right. Some of the AI stuff. Doing a kitten playing VR. And what I love about this image is the kitten is on the screen. It looks like a real game in the background. But look at the controller, and like the way the X is the wrong way around. It's done as a star. But yeah, like it looks like a Final Fantasy game or something. But I just love how it comes up with like just random stuff. Also this one here. It's amazing, isn't it? It is amazing. Have I got another one? No, that's it. All right, guys, I'm wrapping up. Please do take good care of yourselves and be kind. And yeah, the world is complicated. And oh yeah, tune in tomorrow because I'm going to be playing this. I'm really not looking forward to this. This is going to be horrific. Yeah, it's not going to be good. So yeah. All right. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye. Love you.